Our first trays are ready to harvest. So let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to start with the radish, and then we will do the next two trays right after. Right here I have what I use for packaging. These are clamshells. They're made by Genpack. You can find them on Webstaurant, or I generally will use Amazon to get them because I have Prime, so the shipping is free. Webstaurant's pretty expensive for their shipping. These are 16-ounce containers. Now, when you buy a container, they're going to come in what would be a fluid ounce. So you could put 16 ounces of water in one of these containers. But 16-ounce mass is perfect for 2 ounces of microgreens. So that's what I put in my 16-ounce clamshells, is 2 ounces of microgreens. I've got my scale here, and I've got an empty container on it, which I'll use to zero out the scale. Got some scissors. These are just regular scissors. I'm wearing gloves. The scissors have been sanitized with bleach. The whole bench here has been sanitized with bleach. Got paper towel I'll use occasionally to wipe off the scissors as I cut. And we will start. Containers don't always want to lay down on their own. Here we go. I like to grab about a handful, and I'll go not all the way down to the soil line, but just a little bit above it. One thing I like to do when I'm doing small quantities like this, you can do something, take an extra little step. I'll hold the top, and I'll just kind of rub the bottom of the bunch that I just cut, and kind of get out any of the small little microgreens that didn't grow very well. You don't have to be too picky about that, but that's one extra step I like to do. After I get this first row cut, you'll be able to see better. Now, one thing that is a good idea is that if you know you're going to be harvesting your microgreens, try not to water them the day that you're going to harvest them. You want to give them a day to kind of dry up a little bit, but not so much that they actually dry out. But you don't want them to be soaked, because when you go to package them up, if they're soaked, they're going to get gross pretty quick. But if you package them nice and dry like this, they'll last a very long time refrigerated. Radish can easily last, without any trouble at all, 2 weeks refrigerated if they're packed nice and dry. Now, one step that you might notice that I'm not doing is I'm not washing my microgreens. They were grown in a clean environment. Every step of the way was clean, and my label, which we'll get into in another section, actually specifies to wash before enjoying. But quite honestly, I don't think anybody actually does wash them. That washing step is a big step. I'll cover a little bit about how that is done, but in this video we're not going to cover that because that's not the way I do it. Go a little bit more in that container. Now, as I said, I'm using just regular sharp scissors to do this. Another method would be to use a really sharp knife, and you can just go along and cut it that way. That's actually a way that a lot of people prefer to do it. I've actually never even tried. A lot of people have suggested that I do it that way, but I've been happy with the scissors. Just haven't bothered with the knife method. I'm going to turn on my scale. You're going to want a scale that reads in ounces with at least 1 decimal place. Mine happens to have 2 decimal places after the full ounce amount, so you can get a pretty accurate measurement. You're going to want a scale that you can zero out. Mine will zero out just by turning it on, or it does have the tare function that you could push afterwards, but because I turned it on with a tray already on it, and with a container already on it, it's zeroed out. I take that off. These weigh about 0.7 ounces. Put this on. I'm actually way over at 2.65 ounces, but I'm just going to leave that just as it is. It's totally up to you on how accurate you want to be. What's important is that if you say that they're 2 ounces, then they better be at least 2 ounces. It's okay to go over, but it's not okay to go under. That can be totally your judgment call on whether or not you want to go over at all. It's a good idea to at least go a little bit over. That way, if anybody ever was to check, then they would know. You would be comfortable knowing that they're not going to find that you're underweight. This is another thing I do with almost all my microgreens as I'm harvesting them, is I like to stagger them in my container. I'll lay them one way on one handful and then the other way at the other handful. What that does is it gives you a nice edge look from both edges, and they just look great all the way around. You create your own creative ways on how you want to do that. This is a very nice harvest of radish. These easily could have been harvested 1 or 2 days previously, but I wanted to let the other trays catch up, and I wanted to make them all in one video. So I let the radish grow a little bit longer than I normally would have, but they're perfectly fine. We're at 2.55. Again, somebody's getting a great deal. That's way more than 2 ounces. This process actually will go quite quick as you get used to it, especially if you're not trying to make a video. There will be some seed holes here and there in your radish. Don't be concerned about that. It's really not a big deal. It's expected that there's going to be some. Radish will have very few. And they're not like a hard seed hole like beets or sunflower, where you're going to really want to make sure you don't have any of those in your final product. The little seed holes from radish are just not a big deal at all. .3. Just like every section of this course, please make sure you read the detailed write-up that will be below this video, because that's where I'm going to put all the details. Now, if you upgrade to shallow trays later on, harvesting is a lot easier because you don't have to go down. You could use a tall tray like this and bring the soil level all the way up and make harvesting easier, but the thing you're going to lose by doing that is a lot of money, because soil is really about the most expensive part of the whole process. And so if you're using twice as much soil, then you're using too much soil. I try to use as little soil as I can get away with. As you're using less soil, you will have to keep a closer eye on watering because it will dry out faster. But over time, you'll learn just how much you can use or how little you can use. 2.05. So this is just a little on the light side. It's still over 2 ounces, but I like to give myself a little bit of a buffer. So we'll just add a little bit more to there just to be sure. 2.25. And we have enough radish here to fill at least one more tray, or one more container. Radish are one of the easiest microgreens to harvest. So radish has a lot of things going for it. It's one of the easiest to harvest, it's one of the easiest to grow, and it's one of the least expensive seeds. So there's really no reason to not grow radish unless you can't develop a market for it, which I haven't really had any problem selling radish. Everywhere I sell microgreens, people buy the radish. All right, so our final container here is going to be a heavy one. It's probably at least 2.5 ounces. $2.45, so just about 2.5. We ended up with 12 ounces. We've got 6 2-ounce containers here. And really, it was probably more like 14 ounces because each one of these has almost a 1/2 ounce extra, more than the 2-ounce that I said would be in the package. Just gonna wipe my scissors off real quick. Not gonna sterilize them between trays, but I do wipe them off. Sometimes I wipe them off in the middle of the tray, especially if I get too close and get dirt on them or whatever, I clean them up right away. Get this tray out of the way. I'm going to put these in my refrigerator and we'll move on to the next tray. So now we're going to move on to the mustard. Harvest these exactly the same way. You'll find the mustard are a little bit more difficult to harvest than the radish, but not much more difficult. They're just more fragile and not quite as tall. Let me just try one of these tatsois. It's good. Very, very mild. It's not a spicy mustard at all. Same thing, if I notice a clump of seeds or whatever in the bottom, then I will just kind of rub my finger across the bottom and kind of shake that off. I'm actually going to turn the tray. This is the way I normally harvest. I was trying to show you a better view of the tray as I'm harvesting it, but it's hard for me to kind of turn that way. This is the direction I would normally go in. Turn my scale back on. Zero it out. Let's see where we're at. 1.7, so we got to add some more. $1.95. $2.2. Keep going with that. Looks like we're probably going to end up with about 8 to 9 ounces of the mustard. Now these are all looking perfect. They're not damp at all. They're going to hold up really well. But a trick you can do if you find that you have to harvest them and they are a little bit damp, what you can do is either put them in a container. Doesn't have to be one of these clamshells, but I do this in a clamshell. is then I'll put them in the refrigerator and I'll leave the lid open for an hour or so. That will pull a lot of the excess moisture off the microgreens. Then you can go ahead and close the lid and seal them up. .1. There are other options for harvesting microgreens. Some of those do really kind of require that you use a shallow tray or fill the soil all the way to the top on these heavier trays, deeper trays. There's mechanical options out there. There's a quick greens harvester that you can use where you actually just run it through it, and it's got a spinning fibers and a blade, and it just shears it all off. You can also use there's like hedge trimmers you can use. I don't really, because I grow such small amounts, I don't think I really would want to do something like that. It feels to me like that's going to be kind of aggressive on your microgreens. The shears maybe not so much, they may be okay, but something like the quick greens harvester, I haven't done it, so I can't say for sure, but I feel like it's going to kind of damage some of the microgreens as they're going through. But if that's something you want to try, by all means, check it out. So last one's a little bit light at 1.7. So this one we will eat ourselves. Gonna put these in the refrigerator and then I'll grab the mix. Okay, so now we are on to our beautiful mix. These just grew absolutely flawlessly. Super clean, no issues at all. Now what I would normally do is I would take this mix and my big blue bowl I showed you earlier, and I would take some radish and some like red garnet amaranth or beets, something that's got a really deep red to it, and I'd mix it all up in a bowl and then package it. I didn't want to do that because I didn't have you grow amaranth. So I only wanted to show you what I gave you the means of doing. So we're just going to package it up regular. You can sell it or eat it just like this as the mix. You don't have to mix in the extra colors. I just prefer the extra colors, and honestly your chefs will prefer the extra colors as well. But for now, this is totally fine. These first 3 trays were really just about getting your hands dirty, getting you growing. Not necessarily about you selling. Though you certainly could go and give these to chefs or wherever as samples, but really the cost of these 3 trays was really low. You have plenty more seeds to grow more trays. If this worked out perfect for you, then now you know how to grow 3 different kinds of microgreens right now. So you can have a lot more confidence going into it from here. So at 1.95. $2.1. One of the great things about the spicy mix and the basic mix from True Leaf Market is that they both have cabbage in them, and the cabbage gives a nice purple color to the mix. So even if you're not mixing in something else, at least it's not just green. I like to have a little bit of color. So this final container, I'm just going to make extra heavy because I've just got a little bit more to use up. .35. So we got a solid 8 ounces of mix. I'll put these in the refrigerator. So as you can see that these 3 types of microgreens are very easy to harvest. There's no real tricks about it. It's really straightforward, no problem. That's one of the reasons why I picked these 3 to be your first trays. Another one you'll find that are extremely easy that you'll see in the next, well, one of the upcoming sections is the dun pea. Peas are very easy as well to harvest. But a lot of other ones can be tricky. The beets can be tricky. The cilantro can be tricky. Sunflower definitely. But we'll cover all that in more detail later on. But just know that there are some microgreens out there that you can grow easily and you can harvest and package really easily. I will be covering the packaging and the labeling in a lesson right after this one.